Hey guys, welcome to Devtorium Podcast, where we discuss real tech trends and impact. I'm Nataliia, Head of Business Operations, and here with me also today Ted, founder and the advisor to the board, and Abhishek, Chief Innovations Officer.
Hello.
So let's discuss how we got here. Ted, can you tell us how the story of Devtorium begins?
It's a great question, Natalia. I'm glad you asked. Did you get popcorn ready?
I did. Some water
Because
too.
one of the things we see when we say, when did Devtorium start, right? I don't even remember because Abhishek was handling the registration of the company, but it was definitely less than 10 years ago, while in actuality, the history of the company goes back more than, I would say, 30 years even. Because in 1995 was the first time I came across outsourcing. I was at AG, and one of the biggest Indian outsourcing companies, Simtel, was there. So I worked with them. Great developers, poor organization. I didn't like it. A couple years later, I worked at Bank of New York, and I dealt with another very big Indian outsourcing, Tata. Everybody heard about Tata, obviously. Great developers, better organization, still not great. I didn't like it. And in 2002, my then partner Igor and I worked with a Russian company, E-Style, great developers, much better organization, practically, very good. And then when E-Style decided to pull out of the United States, right, Igor and I went our own way. And I think that we tried, and I used the experience earned during those previous stints with Indian companies, right, in Russian. And at that time, we worked with Russians first, but then decided to move out of Russia and tried wide, from Uzbekistan to and ended up in Ukraine. On February 1st, 2006, company, Ukrainian company, started functioning. And at that time, we already implemented some ideas which now sound like common, but at that time were real novelty. For example, equal rights for women. We promoted women to ladies to managerial positions, which at that time in Ukraine was practically unheard of. It was very unusual. Even now, I wouldn't say that it's a common, but definitely much better. We had, liberal vacation policy. So some others. Now once again it sounds common. In 2006 it was anything but common. Then I sold my share in the company, and when in 2017 I helped to organize a new company, Marebis, then when I had no control, I really went wild. So at that time, in 2017, way years before COVID, we already had, how it's called, remote processing, right?
Yeah.
I forgot the term. So people were allowed to work from home whenever they like it. We maintain still enforce the role of women, but also at that time I used my political example, the political organization of Swiss Confederation, which I admire, because what we introduced in Marebis, it's decentralization. We didn't have, besides the upper management, at the same time, all our offices, we even called them canton by using Swiss name, they had a lot of self-autonomy, so to speak. There were a lot of issues decided locally, not by the management, and those via referendum, what we call voting. And those referendums varied from one case like where to keep the coats in the winter, No, the choice was between in a room or a special cloakroom to a separatist movement, which led to split one canton. And Natalia, you know the details even better than I do. And the most also another vivid example when one canton expressed dissatisfaction with the work of the regional manager, and they voted, and the management dismissed. The manager was dismissed, and I think that people were really shocked. Nobody thought that it was that we really meant what we said in this in terms of independence. I think it's still unheard of. And as a matter of fact, when Malkas was sold, the new management immediately got rid of this position of regional managers and went back to a single company with a single something on top. I believe we're still unique in this respect, more or less. And what's interesting, we have now an operation council, which again, Natalia, you know a little bit about, right? Which also basically running the operation for the most part, with me serving, as you mentioned, as an advisor, like ultimate, like vice president of the United States, throwing the vote when there is a disagreement, right? It's still. And what's interesting in this respect, you see, every time when I mention one of those in the initiative, the immediate reaction was, it's not going to work. It won't work. Our people won't do it. And I never believed in that for a simple reason, because based again on that personal experience, I came from the Soviet Union, the most autocratic country in the world still is, right, to the United States, and very quickly made the transition from KGB rule to the democratic. I'm not claiming that the United States is the ultimate democracy in the world, but democratic enough, and it works. We learn. I wasn't I wasn't as democratic when I came to the States, and I learned, and I believe that Ukrainian people were quite capable of also doing the same transition. And for the most part, I would say that I was right, and simply sometimes it takes like more than a year, but for the most part, it works, right? And then the same people who were telling me 3 years ago that TED is not going to work now are saying that, yes, it works, and they can see that it works, right? Not always perfect, but hey, listen, as I said, U.S. democracy is also not perfect, okay? But nothing is perfect. So that's basically it. So what I'm saying is that if we look at Devtorium, when Devtorium was organized, it was organized after 2017, probably 2019, something like that, right? But as I said, it's a result of years and years and years. And as a matter of fact, when recently, when I was looking that the company exists actually more than 20 years, it's scary a little bit.
Yeah, so true.
How long? So we're not talking about Devtorium. Devtorium is the result of a merge of Malkas, aka Marebis, and it became Devtorium when Abhishek Jain joined, also came aboard as the innovation officer. And as an innovation officer, the very first thing that he said, he didn't like the name of the company. Okay, so he came up with this new name.
I'll tell you why, but yeah.
Yeah, to me, there is a Russian saying, call me whatever you want, just, just pay. Okay. No, as I said, I cannot say that I was great about the name of Marebis. Once again, it was linked to and based on the previous name Malkas. I do like the name Devtorium. I was told that the name should be short, easy to pronounce, and meaningless. It's somewhere there. So that's the history of the company.
Thank you, Ted. That's an unusual one, as always, yeah, but so familiar to all of us because we work in that environment, and I can truly trust this. And Abhishek, what about you? Why did you decide to join the company?
Yeah, so thank you, Natalia, and that was a wonderful, little long but wonderful history. And I can say a few things about it too, because I had been part of that journey with Ted, affectionately, Theodore, but we all call him Ted. I've known him for almost now, we are going into 20 years, believe it or not, and he was as handsome then as he was as handsome now. it's
I
so I
agree.
tell you a little about Nataliia before, not in Devtorium, but how I'm a little crazy when it comes to names and everything. So back in 2007, I was already becoming aware of this Ukrainian talent. I was outsourcing at that time quite a bit in India, and I built a very successful outsourcing offshore center. So much so that I was interviewed by Wall Street for that model, and we were on the front page. I was on the front page, and the article was called Cast Away. India has the caste system. So the Cast Away was the name of the article, June 22nd, 2007. It was published on the front page of Wall Street, and it won the Best Article of the Month award. And I was interviewed by Paul Bucket, a very known journalist, reporter of Wall Street. But I was getting a little frustrated with the speed, with the little bit on the tinge of the culture and other things. Again, I'm just expressing my opinion. Absolutely, there is no generalization of the country. Wonderful country. I was born and raised in India, and I'm super, super proud of my identity. And people ask me between these two countries, and I say, India is my identity, America is my recognition. So who do I, weigh in what scale? There is for me, they are my two eyes. Do I love my left eye or the right eye? So for me, that's what India means to me, and that's what United States, the wonderful country, means to me. So 2008-9, I was introduced to Ted. I was working for a company running their IT. And as I was transitioning out of that business, my wife, who's another amazing, talented, technologist, she was introduced with Ted at that time, Marcos, and she loved the company. She's been to Ukraine 10, 12 times, and it all went great. I went to a different business, and we outsourced a lot of work to a different company. It was in Sevastopol at that time. Okay. And I had a wonderful friend there, Dimitri, who's our client now, and he has been my partner and co-founder with me. So come 2013-14, and I came up with an idea, and the name of the company was Fusion. Okay. And then Fusion, everybody asked me, why do you call your company Fusion? I said, because I'm building a funnel optimization software, and it needs a lot of art and it needs a lot of science. And what is the best way to combine those two things together? It's a fusion. So I called it Fusion. And then I was asking my wife, I said, now I need a team. We got the funding. We got funded by the IBM family, people who started IBM 100 years ago. Grandson of Mr. Watson, Tom Watson, was my investor and became my partner, Kid Watson. So together we built several companies. And as I secured the funding, I asked my wife, and she said, oh, you should talk to Ted. They have wonderful business. So Ted was referred to me by none other than my better half in all aspect. Okay. The brains and everything, all about, I said, okay, great. And then, I talked to Ted and Ted's partner, and that's where the whole journey started. Had an amazing experience. We built together 5 different products, SaaS products. Fusion was one of them. There was another product, Trist, and then there was another, and journey went on. 2017, Fusion found a partner. He was my Spanish partner, value-added reseller. And they were promoting my product, in all the Spanish and the Portuguese speaking countries, which is, a lot of South America, a lot of Spain. And there I had, wonderful conversation with a very famous, he was the Walt Mossberg of Wall Street. His name was Norberto. And he asked me that question, of all the places, why Ukraine? You don't look Ukrainian, you don't speak Ukrainian, you don't even like their food. Guys, sorry, guys. Your food is amazing, just not of my. I love spices, okay? But, there are a few places where I love Ukrainian food. Okay. So I said, it's very simple. These guys are fearless. They are not afraid to say no. They do not take orders, okay? You have to convince them even if you pay them to work on your idea. And that's what I love about it. They have very strong ethics, 8 to 6. When they are in the office, they absolutely they do not need supervision. They will just work off of their own, and that is the culture I love. And he asked me lots and lots of questions. I had press conferences. I was on TV because my partner in Spain, he was one of the channel investors, and he was working for Spanish TV. So I just got lucky with him. We sold that company. We got acquired by a public company and did the great work. And then I went to WeWork for some time, and then WeWork, had the destiny of its own. And then came 2019, I come up with another idea. And the idea was, before ChatGPT, I came up with the idea of writing a content writing software using AI, using the vector, programming. That was basically the whole idea, the machine learning, the LLM model and all that stuff. And then I contacted Ted. I said, Ted, I've got this. And Ted says, you know what? We will do the same that you did before. We will not just build your product. We will buy you out. I want you to come in the company, join us, because we want to do something differently. That's where the conversation started in early 2019. And I came in, and the first thing I said, I don't like the name of Malkos. He said, what would you want to call it? I said, for me, programming is like performance in the theater. Okay, that's what for people programming binary 0 1s, they are 0 1s. For me, it's a poem. For me, it's a song. It's like harmony. And that's what I call about programming. It's like Messi. He's the artist of the football, soccer. And I said, I would love to call something which is like a theatrical performance, an auditorium, like a Devtorium, where developers perform the art and the engineering of writing code, writing product, writing program. I said, that's how I look at the company. I did not like the idea, but he went with it. He said, fine, whatever that mumbo jumbo you're talking about, go with it. I have no problem. So then I come in as a chief innovation officer and a small investor, and then together we build that product, done some amazing work. I'm absolutely in love with country. Did not take me too long to learn the language, actually, but you guys will make fun of it because I know you will, but I'm actually fully literate in Russian and Ukrainian. My vocabulary is very poor. You guys know that. I can say 10, 15 sentences, which I just use wherever I go. But that's really the history. Still in love with the company, love it. We have done some amazing, amazing work. People are great. Now, let me ask you this. I know Ted has given a very good answer already, but anything that, Ted, you would like to cover on what sets us apart? I know you have talked about the uniqueness. You talked about the culture of the company, but what else? What else is out there that attracts people? We don't need to promote our company. We attract people. We don't promote it. What are the other attractions of our company that you would wanna mention?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Good question. Well, first of all, I want to correct you because when you came over, it was Moravis. It was not Malkus.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your wife worked.
Yes,
your wife worked with Malkus.
My bad.
At that time, it was already Moravis. What attracts us? Well, you see, whatever those uniqueness of our operations in Ukraine, that's the operations really. We always, I believe, what happens that we always maintain when, let's say, potential client approach us when we're talking to somebody, we always maintain a stringent way of working. We didn't jump on the project. We always were saying that we have to analyze, we have to understand. We had cases when we were able to explain to the client, convince him that what he wants is not really what he needs. We always start with analysis, right? We said from the very beginning that we don't compete on the price, right? Because in fact, during those global search, we even there was a period of time when we worked with programmers from many different countries, including Vietnam, which was cheap, right? The price was very low. The quality was even lower. Right, the biggest issue, let's say, with Vietnam, because at one time, it was popular. When India faded a little bit from the popularity, from the peak of her popularity, then people started talking about China. People started talking about Vietnam, for example, where the rates very, very low. But what we encountered, for example, right, number one in Vietnam, no English. Right, you have only one person to communicate. Right, you cannot talk with developers. In our company, English is a requirement. You cannot come in without language knowledge. It can be more fluent, it can be less fluent, and that's why we have offer courses, let's say, and we're working always that people have to be able to communicate with the client. That's a
And if I
requirement.
remember correctly, we even had an English teacher on our payroll.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a full-time person who was just teaching English on our payroll. So which is
Right. We had
that's
it
how serious
in
we are.
every canton. We had the teacher, and we were teaching. And as a matter of fact, right now, I don't know practically anybody. Like I'm thinking who cannot communicate with the client in English. Once again, sometimes better, sometimes worse. But then, if you look at the United States, it's easy in this respect because we all speak with an accent. Me included, right? United within the United States, right? Let's say Native American born people, there is a huge difference between how people talk in New York and how do they talk in Texas. So people are used to different accents, right? But that was one requirement. We always had a very strong trailblazers, right? Somebody who can come in, come to the client and show the understanding of the business need, not technical. The technical platform, it's easier when you know what the client needs really. And once again, I repeat, not necessarily what the client wants, what the client needs. It really buys the trust, right? The people. And as a matter of fact, it happened to you in the beginning when we worked with Abhishek. He always like saying, he wanted less money, and I told him at one point, I said, you want less money, go to India. Their rates are cheaper. We don't compete on the prices. And actually, you should be the one who can explain the story, because what happened, Abhishek also came, right? He had one project, and he gave 3 projects, and he had 5 projects, right? And how it happened, because he liked what he saw, right? The way, how the task was approached, how the organization worked. There was, I believe so. When I'm saying that Abhishek should be an expert in this. What attracted the
I will
clients?
talk about it in the next question, but let Natalia.
Sorry, I think I can summarize. It's all about freedom, yeah, for all the
Yeah,
workers at Devtorium, yeah. But what we have to do with that freedom, we are responsible what we are doing. So we are responsible for that. So responsibility is freedom, freedom is responsibility. That's what I think makes us standing out of the crowd. We all understand what we have to do. Thank you, Ted.
to me, freedom, let me explain a little bit, because you see, freedom is like a very wide definition. In our case, what I'm saying, and what I learned, by the way, from my experience, once again, whatever I was always saying, that I always wanted to build a company where I would like to work for. Okay. And our freedom was that, unlike even in the States corporate environment, people know that they can express themselves. They express their opinion, right? They can express disagreements, comments, so on. They will be heard, right? We don't have this big boss who knows it all. By the way, more common among men than women, that way always like to work. For women managers, they're more kind of to hear, to listen, to ask for an advice. I think that for several years, once again, like everything else, it took time. It took time, but people understand, people believe that they know that they can talk. They can talk, they heard, and there won't be any repercussions for, let's say, something that doesn't agree with the policy. But that's internal. That's internal. In terms of the question was about with the clients, I believe, and once again, Abhishek can say from his experience, I believe that the approach of understanding, not just coming in and starting talking about we'll do it cheap, right? We never offer a fixed price until we always have an evaluation phase. We always we always try to understand what is necessary, and then we can produce, we can produce a real proposal based on the needs, not like sometimes, and we were in a competition when somebody right away from the spot gives you already the final price. And I always say, how do you know? How can it be done if you don't even know what really needs to be done? And our best clients were the clients who went for this cheaper, right? And passed the proposal, got burned, and then they came to us, Those then because there was already no discussion about the price. It was just, coming right and do it.
And there are so many of our clients which are venture funded. So many clients that were funded by the best and the biggest VC firm in the United States, Kleiner Perkins. We got the companies that were funded by Sigma Partners, by Starbucks, by Coke, by Connecticut Innovations, private equity offices. So that shows that the companies that were trusted by their investors had the trust in us. I am an example. I am the most live example of my trust in the business that I decided. Company that was you guys were my vendors, for lack of a better, just saying partner. I had full trust, and all I had is just, success, and success is not proven. Success is accepted by a large audience, in the lack of evidence of other alternative models. And when I came in here, I had the success that was accepted by previous companies, and I came in here and I have the same thing, and that's the word I spread. And just imagine anybody and everyone who I knew, who I referred you guys, now it's us, they all came in here. So many of, when I built my first company, Fusion, the first 10 clients that I had, they all knew me, from my past life. Money that I raised from Watson's, the reference I got for that Watson, that came from the first company that I worked for when I came to United States in 97, 98. Okay, so reference is the most reliable, the most credible, and the trusted way to market your service, because that's the only place where it's a marketing of attraction when it comes to the references, the referrals. All the other channels of marketing are simply promotion in some way, shape, or form. That is one channel where you attract people, So yeah, and we are, and that is one channel that has taken us where we are today.
Yeah. Well, and
one comment, Nataliia, going back to history, I just realized something. When I was saying that there were a lot of policies that we introduced from the beginning, right? I remember when COVID started, right? And a lot of companies got real huge problem. All of a sudden, people cannot come to the office. It was like an avalanche, right? And in our case, it was business as usual because we were used to it already.
had
That's
that
how we work all the time. The COVID was a little bit inconvenience, in the meaning you couldn't get together in the office right allowed. But in terms of weathers, I remember one year in Lviv on January 1st, they changed completely the routing of the buses, right, public transportation. The guy called the office and he says, I'm on a bus, but I have no idea where I'm going. It was a total disaster. And as I said, it was in the beginning of January. So for us, I simply said we were telling people not to come to the office during the flu epidemics, right? So this notion that you have to be in the office, when I started working in the United States, right, and they started at 9 a.m., there were managers who at 9:05 were already making the round the office, who's absent. They were checking. Have more. That's to me, it's one of the freedom. People know that they have to produce. They don't have to come to the office when the buses running God knows where the streets are covered with 10 feet snow, whatever. So then they don't go. They don't have to come, and that helps. But to me, right, it was simply funny when I remember COVID, right, and companies struggling with it. And for us, it's like nothing new. Okay, COVID, what can I say?
Well, thank you, Ted.
You're welcome.
And in the meantime, dear viewers, if you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe on our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn Devtorium page. We share some insights on tech, teams, and real stories behind successful projects.
Amazing, amazing. And Nataliia, I would love to turn the mic to you and ask you about your journey, your tenure with Devtorium. You tell us how you feel about the company. What you feel. Obviously, you are a wonderful, wonderful manager, and you know how much our clients, enjoy working with you, and all of us altogether. Tell us the key decisions that we have taken. We all have made the company the way it is. It's just not Ted or me or Tom. Tom is our CEO, by the way, if those people are viewers who are listening to us. So tell us, bring it on. Tell us, who we are, what we do, how you feel about the company.
Well, I can say that I have never felt alone, staying alone. And I think that the key factor here is always staying in contact with everyone I'm working with, staying true to myself and building the relationship with the client. I think that constant efforts on finding the common ground helped me and the teammates and those people who always supported me. I always had a shoulder and I still have it. Yeah. Just I understand that I'm not alone here. And it's what helps us move forward. Yeah. Win new hearts. I'm not saying even the clients win new hearts, because the prevailing majority of our clients stay with us since the very establishment of the company. And it means a lot to me. I have lots and lots of people, I'm not saying contacts, I'm not saying like business partners, but people who keep coming back, stay in contact, just ask of me how I'm doing. Yeah, I do remember the war started. Yeah, and I had every single person, even like 8 years ago, working with them. They're getting back because we did build a relationship. So it's the key thing that we always have to take care of. And if we are all doing our best, then I do believe we have that relationship. We have the business prospering. Yeah. We have the income and everything, rolling in the right direction, by the way, in the right direction. That's the key point here. So I think that supporting the team I'm working with and feeling support from them, and the same way I can say about the leaders I work here in the organization I work with, I have their support always, no matter how stressful the situation is. And there are sometimes such situations. So I do believe that staying together, communicating, having that transparency and honesty helps us build really valuable things here. So
No,
thank you.
that's great. That's great. And I think that's what makes us so unique, because that fearless, culture of the company, and everyone has a voice. There are no egos, absolutely. Even if the frontline of employee of the company has a great idea, we will all listen to it, we will all embrace it. And somebody said long time ago, that Jobs always had a great idea, always. And people said, like, how come he had the best idea? They said, no, it's not that he always had the great idea from his side. He would talk to anybody in the company, and if he liked that idea, he would go so deep into it that ultimately he will own the idea. So it became his idea, and that's how we are. And there is another famous phrase that if in a company, or in a management team or in partners, if everybody agrees, then except one person, everyone else is useless. Okay, because if there is no disagreement, that means you don't have a culture of sharing and exploring and brainstorming different ideas. I have a question for you, Nataliia, and that is the most burning question in our time. Ukraine as a country is facing its own share of challenges for almost 12 years now, 13 years, if for that matter. Country has gone through one split in 2014. Then came COVID. Obviously the whole world faced that challenge. And then came the war between Russia and Ukraine. And now there is another war happening, with the, multiple countries are involved. What do you want to tell us if I were your client? Why would I want to come and work for a company? Okay, company looks great. People look promising. There is an evidence. There is a credibility. There is a longevity. So I see all that stuff. But then there is a political, economical, the whole pastel thing. Everything is working against us. There is a political instability, economical instability, social is okay, technological is okay, environmental, culture. Tell us, why would I wanna, what you wanna tell our viewers, what you wanna tell our audience? How would you wanna, root that trust that we are still okay?
Well, I always say, and I repeat the true facts, that the customers are staying with us for long, long years. And how can we really perform effectively in this circumstance, right? I have been presenting business continuity plans many, many times. Just presenting is not enough. It's when you really are in that plan and you are with that experience, with the real experience. It's unfortunate that we are in such a situation, in the war. But saying to the client how we work, we do have the portable electric stations. Yes, we have passive optical network, which allows us working nonstop during the operational hours and be online whenever the client needs that. That's one of the factors. But if we are just touching the psychological factor, right? What I observed, and I can say about myself the same thing, that work helps us stay. I even say that it's one of the key senses here for us. Yeah. So we are doing our best to do the high quality job in this crazy times. I think it's unexplainable how productive we are. It's unexplainable. We just have the thing to do, and we are doing that no matter what are the circumstances. Ted, you wanted to add something?
Yes, because here's also one thing. You see, during those times, in 2014, right, when the problems in Ukraine started, right, with such a lovely neighbor of yours, okay, from the very beginning, and it was my initiative, I'm not going to share the credit with anybody, right? The idea was to invite the clients to Ukraine. Before the war, it was simply to see how we operate. We're not some shoddy operation. We are definitely like people come. One time we were sharing the same building with Nestle. It was impressive. But we had a case when a client manager, went to Ukraine to close the project, and instead, when he looked at the operation, when he looked at the office, right, when he looked at the people, on the contrary, he expanded the project, right?
Right.
So the idea in the beginning, it was the idea just to show what Ukraine is, because people heard about Ukraine, but it was when I came to the United States. Oh, you're from Russia. You're from Russia. No, I'm not from Russia. I'm from Ukraine. Okay, so not many people realized in the state that actually the Soviet Union is not just Russia. And then in 2015, the clients panicked, quite understandably, right? In their mind, the Russian tanks were already close to the Polish borders. And we even made the map to show that it's a big country, right? And whatever happens in California does not affect New York necessarily, something to such degree. And it so happened with this persistence, right? Calling the Abhishek is already laughing because he knows the example that I want to say. Clients convincing other clients that it's nice and dandy.
Yeah, I will share that with you. Yeah.
To go to Ukraine, right, when all those calamities started, and he got scared. So he had two tickets. He had the ticket from India to Munich, and from Munich he had two tickets, one to the United States, one to Ukraine. And we had another client from Belgium right, in the office. And this client was a Belgian guy, who talked to Abhishek and told him, "No, come on over. It's nice. It's fun here. It's no problem." And that's Abhishek came to Ukraine, and then he was telling already somebody, "It's no problem."
I'll share that. I'll share that with you because it's a really interesting play here. I was going to India for some time, and then on the way back, Chernobyl was not Chernobyl, Crimea had already happened. And and then Ted and his partner asked me to, come over. And I said, Ukraine, no, you guys have a war. And he said, no, that's on the other side of the planet. And, imagine if there is a small riots in California, would you not live in New York? I said, yeah, of course I will. And then, so we needed a bit of a coaching, because my wife and my parents and everybody said, oh, no, my mom started crying and everything. And then I talked to my investor who's betted a lot of money on me. And he said, AJ, if you die, what's going to happen to, I'll be crying at your funeral, but I will also be looking at my bank balance. I just lost, a big number. So, and then, to Ted's, and his partners, genuine generosity, they said, no, you come over, we'll pick you up from the airport. So first time on February 2nd, 2014, I go to Ukraine. Ted's partner comes and picks me up, so kind of him. He picks me up from the airport. I go to the my hotel. I check in, and then he says, okay, don't just check in and stay at the room. Come on out. I will show you Ukraine. I go Renok Square of Lviv, and there are thousands and thousands of people dancing, singing, and all that. And before that, I had a call with another guy who was a client of Malcos at that time, a CVS. And he said, it's absolutely fine. So clients are convincing clients, and I was one of them, And from there, I called Watson. I said, Watson, look at this. I had a video call, with my investor, with my partner, and with my family, So I took that chance, and it was not any risk or anything, but sometimes we just need a bit of an education and just the coaching, and company went above and beyond. It's just not to give us the confidence, but it was genuine. They are just not risking my life, or I'm not risking my life. So it was really interesting. And since then, rest is, as they say, history. I made 4 or 5 trips in 2014, even more trips in 2015. I've been to Ukraine many. Not even once in all of those 25, 30 trips. Even once I have felt that I was out of place, or any kind of risk or concern or danger of any sort. And I've been to like 7, 8 different cities, some small, some big, and, of all the places. So it's a wonderful place to work. And absolutely, my heart goes out to people, and, and the struggle that you guys are having. And Slava Ukraini, as you said, I'm sure ultimately you will win. Tell us, yeah. So,
But by the way, I'm sorry, Abhishek, was interrupt. But as I said, in 2014, we were showing the client the map where we are and where Russians also is. Now, when we have a real war, like no clients who has expressed already any problems or anything, any issues, nobody asks anything, right? Everybody already knows that yes, there is organization, there is a plan B. Everybody learned already what's happening. And to me, it was really refreshing compared with 2014 that we didn't have to explain that we're functioning. We're still, it's not always easy. There are some issues, but the business is more or less business as usual, right?
Yeah.
What about creating an effective business model and how to keep the business scalable?
There are several aspects to this, how to be effective. Number one is quality of your work. And it's would be easy to hire all the superstars, right? I don't know whether it would be effective because the prices would be also compatible. So we always were building, my notion is always let people grow internally more than invite, strong outsiders, because outsiders don't always work. There are failures. We had a case where we worked with a guy because he left, then he came back and failed, completely failed. Human factor is extremely important. When at Malkus, for example, now Maravis, Devtorium, I'm sorry, right? At Malkus, because it was simply longer, like all our managers came as the juniors and they grown internally. That's number one. Number two, working with the clients. Working with people is never easy. Sometimes it is, most times it's not, right? So it has to be an extremely careful what Nataliia will support me in this, that you have to document, right? You have to document what you're doing, what you discussed, because words are, people are saying the same words, but they put different meanings in those words. So it's not just talking about trust or distrust. It's really making sure that you're on the same page. You're on the same page, because otherwise it's difficult. And three, looking for red flags, when dealing with a client, because let's face it, not all clients are honest. And we had some tough period. As a matter of fact, Malkus ran into difficult times because my partner was telling me that they're rolling in dough, and I said that they may be rolling in dough, but it doesn't mean that they're paying us. They're not paid. So we we have a rule. We can be flexible. We had on many occasions we work with the client. We will provide services for future payments. Helping one something like that. But at the same time, we, let's say, we have a firm rule which I enforced after Malkus experience again. Third invoice, after third invoice with two previous invoices unpaid, we stopped working. Because that unless there is some agreement, there is understanding, something like that, it's very hard. In Russian, there is a saying: you always borrow somebody's money, you have to give back your own.
Yeah.
So when the clients stop paying, it's a red flag, because sometimes they can run another. And it's business. Listen, we are not for profit. We have salaries to pay, expenses to pay, rents to pay, and so on and so forth. So in terms of effectiveness, as I said, building up the trust, right? Producing the good quality, showing understanding the business, not just technical, but business. We were, as a matter of fact, one of those uniqueness. We were a long time ago. We were one of the first companies in Ukraine that introduced this PMO, Project Manager Organization department, which didn't exist. And once again, I wish I could say that it was my invention, but it was not. I have a friend who came up with this. He was actively actually implementing when I talked to him, Yuri Chirnak, and I like the idea because we did try to do something like that in 19 got at Merrill Lynch, right? And it was not approved to have, like dedicated organization. So once again, not having any control, I did it at Moravis. We had this department, which I believe is very effective and is led by an excellent manager present here.
Was that one, right?
Right.
Thank you,
But
Ted.
yeah, that's how building trust, producing quality, and watching out for red flags.
Yeah,
That's more or less.
thank you. Well, Abhishek,
I know you were gonna ask me that question. So
what about the
I
assumptions
I had an idea.
yeah.
So one
Assumptions
of
that
the
we are testing right now that might lead us to next evolution?
Yeah, so my role is, as the name, as the title suggests, I watch out for, what they call it, when the dogs aren't barking. When the everything is quiet doesn't mean it's quiet. Dogs may not be barking, but there may be something somewhere that they are not hearing. And that's what I try to do. I do not have the precognition abilities. I do not see the future before it happens, but I do have a pretty good sense of, the early signals of opportunities or threats or the weaknesses. And as you can tell that, we saw AI coming in 2018 before it actually landed in 2021. So obviously everyone is asking, AI is up there, how's going to land, what's going to happen? We are already working on it. We started working on it long time ago. We are already ahead of, where those agentic AIs are going to take us. What's the ultimate landing of the AI is going to look like. You will see that soon. I am writing a lot about it these days. We are having those conversations very early already. And as for the scalability, I think the key is, and I'm going to ask you that question too, as well, because you are the front end of our organization, managing and listening to our key customers, if not all, but our key customers who, stay engaged with. Where I take the most interest, what my passion is to listening to those early signals. And as right now, everyone is talking about AI. Everyone is talking about the AI. And I'm looking at, okay, what is beyond AI? Well, okay, it's here, it's up in the air, it's going to land soon. And then what? Okay, then what? So I'm making some bold predictions, and our viewers will see it, when they follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube, what we are saying, what we are talking about, where that change is going to be. And one prediction, I've already made. I think everyone is talking about it in a very scary way. And right now, big companies can only prove the efficiency of the AI is in a very ruthless way, and which is the downsizing of the organization. People are still figuring out, what is the contribution of AI towards the innovation, speed to market, achievable market, and efficiency. And I call it the ruthless efficiency. This efficiency is going to come at the cost of lot of unemployment, for a short time, and then we will see much, better at what we are. That's what AI is going to do. It is going to make this mankind, this earth, this our living a better place. We will not have to work all 5 days. I think it's going to be a 4 days work week. I think the families are going to get 11 hours back to 12 hours, 15 hours back to their family. I think this, I know it's going to sound crazy, but last 70 years have been the most peaceful time in mankind. Okay, last 70 years are the most peaceful, even amongst all these wars and COVID and everything. We have never lived in last 5, 10,000 years as people as we have been living the last 70 years. And I think the next 100 years are going to be even better. So we just have to wait. You just have to wait and then see where it's going to go. Nataliia, now I'm gonna ask you something. Unless I thought you wanted to say something.
No,
No.
thank
Okay.
you.
So tell us about the evolution of our company. You live in the world of managing the customer flow in and out. You had our PMO group, and I had been in the fan of PMO from the very early days when I was head of tech. First thing I used to do is to form a PMO group, a program management, project management, product management, okay, whatever you want to call it. But I've been doing it since 2003, 2004. Right after Deloitte, I was more into management and the executive positions. I'm fully, vested in the concept, but I want to hear it from you. Managing clients year over year, managing the goods and and not so goods and the challenges, country, culture, fights, economy. How do you do that?
Well, I think it's just looking at every single case separately, not having, of course, we do have some kinds of templates, but approaching every single case and looking at it from different angles. And what I can say, if we're just talking about AI thing and continuing the topic about AI and working with the customers nowadays, what I can say, we do have the brainstorming sessions with the tech teams on what tools we are using, what are the better tools, and how to improve, to optimize the development, to speed it up. We do have really smart people in the teams, and I'm really actually fascinated of how they are finding those solutions, how they approach all the cases they face. So, and now, yeah, we are still in the middle of building the policies and working with different parties on that, gathering the experiences. I think that every single organization is going through that right now. And we have the same cases in our customers' companies. They share their own experience, with us, because they are asking questions from us, how we approach AI era, I would say. Yeah. But in that case, it's really great working together, sharing the experiences, and I'm sure that smart people will come up with the best solutions. And communication here, no matter how great AI is, human communication and coming to the best solutions is the key now. Well, I do believe that, as you mentioned, Abhishek, no matter what, we are here and we are doing our best, and only the best things are ahead of us.
And I know we are such a diversified, Rolodex of clients. We have an Egyptian clients, we have Kazakh clients, we have Uzbeki clients, South African clients of all US, UK, Germany, Canadian.
Yes.
Do you find it challenging, interesting? How do you see that? Like, how,
Very much.
anything differently than the other companies who have a pretty, very, a unique set of just the US clients and English speaking, because we have clients from all over, all sorts of continents.
Yeah, it's, of course, we do have challenges, and very often these are cultural differences. At the same time, the more diversities we have, the better it is for our teams, for us to understand how to work on that or the other case. But what helps us, even in the most critical situations, is that for me personally, I always feel protected, I always feel support from the leader. Yeah. And then I go and do my job in the best way I can. Yeah, that's how I work. Ted is the key person here. So I'm sure that I can do my best because I know I have the support. The same thing is for the people I'm working as a leader for. So if they have my support, they will do their best. They will do everything possible and impossible to reach an agreement, to deliver a solution, to resolve an issue. And that's what helps us to stay productive in any circumstance.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
And now the question to both of you. If our listeners would want to adopt at least one element of our business model, what would it be? Abhishek, maybe you would just like to be the first one.
Sure. Let me answer that. Very simple for me. If people, those who have the patience to get to the end of our our podcast, and I hope you really do, because I think it's a great conversation that we have had today. I would say, if you want to really learn something from us and you want to implement that in your company, two advice: make a culture, a company of fearless and safe zone for your employees to have that conversation. Okay, that is one. If they do not have a safe zone, if they do not feel safe having fearless conversations, they're not going to be fearless, and that means you are going to have an organization of great minds, mediocre execution. Okay, that's one. Second, I would suggest, do not just build the organization of order takers yet, but passionate people, because passion is gifted. Passion cannot be taught. Skills can be taught. So find that passion in people and then see if that passion can be taken to the next level, apply in their day-to-day life. They are not just taking orders from their clients. If you do that, I think you're going to build from a good organization to a great organization. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Abhishek. Ted, what about you? Do you agree with Abhishek, or do you have your own point?
Yeah, the same thing, because I mentioned from the beginning that one of what I was striving for is trusting people, believing in people. It's not necessarily easy, right? The cultural gap exists. It's not a joke, right? It's working tough. But as I said, once again, from my experience, if I could to make this transition from the Soviet Union to the United States, I believe that people, everybody can do it. And then you become passionate, I think, and Nataliia, you would be testify better to this effect, when you know that you're being treated as a person, not just a resource. When that you listen, there is what I like to say many times, there are no such thing as stupid questions, for example.
Yeah.
You can, and just letting people to be free within the confines of organization.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, it was a great conversation today. Sometimes it's funny, you know. Well, thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Ted, for today's insights. And to our viewers, I'm saying if you are enjoying the podcast today, please subscribe on our YouTube channel and follow the Devtorium page on LinkedIn. We share some tech insights and real stories behind successful projects.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Nataliia. Thank you.